The crimson skies of Mars Command flickered with emergency lights as Admiral Jake Morrison slammed his fist against the steel console. The impact sent a sharp crack through the reinforced titanium surface, but Jake barely noticed the pain shooting through his knuckles. Fear coursed through his veins like liquid fire as he watched the holographic display, showing massive alien ships approaching the outer rim of the solar system. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not today. Not ever, if he was being honest with himself. Sure, they'd run countless simulations prepared for every possible scenario. But seeing those enormous vessels materialize out of the void was like watching your worst nightmare come to life in vivid, terrifying detail. How many? He barked at Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez, his tactical officer. The young woman's face was pale beneath the red emergency lighting, her fingers dancing across her control panel with practiced precision despite the tremor in her hands. 300 ships, sir. Maybe more. They were enormous. Voice trembled as she processed the incoming data, her eyes widening with each new sensor reading. Sir, the largest one is over 12 kilometers long. These aren't exploration vessels. They're built for war. The silence that followed was deafening. Could hear the collective intake of breath from 30 seasoned officers who'd seen their share of combat. But nothing like this. Nothing that made their most advanced warships look like toys by comparison. Sir, they're transmitting on all frequencies, Emma continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake's stomach twisted into knots. He'd been dreading this moment for 20 years, ever since the deep space monitoring stations had first detected signs of advanced civilizations beyond their solar system. The question had never been if they would come, it was when, and whether humanity would be ready. The main screen crackled to life, revealing a towering alien creature with multiple arms and burning yellow eyes that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of space-time. Its voice boomed through the command center like thunder, each word carrying the weight of absolute authority and barely contained violence. Humans of Earth. I am Commander Vex of the Galactic Dominion. Your pathetic species has exactly 2 hours to surrender unconditionally. Join our empire as slaves, or watch your world burn. The creature's image flickered and stabilized, revealing details that made Jake's blood run cold. Scars crisscrossed its chitinous hide, telling stories of countless battles. Its eyes held the kind of cold intelligence that spoke of a being who had conquered entire star systems and felt nothing but mild satisfaction at the destruction. Jake's jaw clenched as rage built inside him, hot and primal. Around the command center, his crew stared in shocked silence. This was the moment they'd all feared first contact. And it was a death sentence delivered with the casual indifference of a cosmic predator. But wait, wasn't first contact supposed to be peaceful? Wasn't it supposed to involve careful diplomacy, cultural exchange, maybe even friendship? The irony would have been laughable if it wasn't so absolutely terrifying. Instead of extending a hand in friendship, the galaxy had sent them an executioner. Admiral, whispered Captain Mike Thompson from the communications station, his face ashen with fear. They're jamming all our deep space signals. We can't warn Earth in time. The communication relays are completely blocked. Jake's mind raced, like a supercomputer processing impossible calculations. 24 hours. Against an armada that could probably glass their planet in minutes. The math was simple and brutal. Humanity had about as much chance as a paper airplane in a hurricane. He looked around at his crew, really looked at them. These were good men and women who'd sworn to protect humanity, who'd dedicated their lives to defending a planet that most of them hadn't seen in years. They'd followed him to the edge of the solar system, trusted his leadership, believed in his vision of a strong defense network, and now they were about to die. But as Jake stared into their faces, faces filled with fear, yes, but also with determination, something shifted inside him. Paralyzing terror began to transform into something else entirely. Something that burned hotter than fear and cut deeper than despair. Pure, unadulterated defiance. Not today, he growled, his voice carrying the kind of authority that had made him the youngest admiral in Mars Command history. Emma, activate Protocol 7. It's time to show these alien bastards what humans are really capable of. The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown at the universe itself. Protocol 7, the contingency plan they'd hoped never to use, the last resort that had been decades in the making. Around the command center, officers began moving with renewed purpose, their training kicking in despite the impossible odds. "Sir?" Emma's voice cracked slightly. "Are we really going to do this? Against 300 ships?" Jake's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. "Lieutenant, they made one critical mistake. They assumed we'd be easy prey. They assumed we'd roll over and surrender like every other species they've encountered." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "They have no idea what they're dealing with." The question that burned in everyone's mind was simple. What exactly was Protocol 7? More importantly, did humanity really have a secret weapon powerful enough to face down an entire galactic empire? As emergency klaxons began to wail throughout Mars Command, Jake Morrison stood at the center of a storm that would either save humanity or witness its final moments. The next 24 hours would determine whether Earth remained free or became just another conquered world in the Dominion's vast empire. The battle for humanity's survival was about to begin. The stakes couldn't be higher. Just like how small, consistent actions can compound into massive results over time. Something we'll explore in our next video about the incredible power of compounding. Humanity's years of preparation were about to pay dividends in the most spectacular way imaginable. Don't miss it. Commander Vex watched Earth's primitive blue sphere through his flagship's viewport, already imagining the glory of another conquered world. The planet hung there like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked, its single moon casting shadows across continents that would soon bow before the might of the Galactic Dominion. His fleet had destroyed countless civilizations across the galaxy, wiped entire species from existence with the casual efficiency of a cosmic exterminator. This would be no different, or so he thought. The bridge of his massive dreadnought hummed with quiet efficiency as his crew prepared for what they assumed would be a routine conquest. Vex's multiple arms gestured dismissively at the tactical displays showing Earth's pathetic defenses. A few orbital satellites, some primitive missile systems, and what appeared to be a handful of interplanetary vessels scattered throughout the solar system. It was almost insulting how easy this was going to be. "Sir," his tactical officer hissed. Compound eyes reflecting the bridge's amber lighting, the humans are broadcasting a surrender message. Vex's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. Of course they were surrendering. Every species eventually recognized the futility of resistance when faced with the Dominion's overwhelming power. It was the natural order of things. The strong conquered. The weak and the galaxy belonged to those with the will to take it. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a human in military uniform. The creature looked remarkably similar to the other bipedal species they'd encountered, though perhaps more resilient-looking than most. Its face was etched with what appeared to be defeat and resignation. "Commander Vex, this is Admiral Jake Morrison of Earth Defense Command. We surrender. Please, don't destroy our world." The words hung in the air like a white flag of capitulation. Around the bridge, Vex's officers exchanged glances of barely concealed boredom. Another species. Another surrender. The pattern was so predictable it had become routine. Vex's mandibles clicked with amusement. Wise choice. Human. Prepare for occupation.
Ow.
Your species will serve the Dominion well as laborers and servants. But here's where things get interesting. And trust me, you're going to want to pay attention to this next part because it changes everything. As the Dominion fleet crossed Neptune's orbit, something impossible happened. The lead ships simply stopped moving, as if caught in an invisible net that defied every law of physics Vex understood. One moment they were advancing at full sublight speed, the next they were hanging motionless in space like insects trapped. In amber, alarms screamed across every bridge as engines failed and weapon systems went offline. The massive dreadnoughts that had terrorized 1,000 worlds suddenly found themselves as helpless as newborn, creatures floating in the void. "What's happening?" Vex roared, his confidence cracking like ice under pressure. His forearms flailed at the control panels, trying to make sense of readings that shouldn't exist. "Engineering. Report. Sir, all propulsion systems are offline. Weapons are non-responsive. It's like something is interfering with our basic ship functions at the quantum level. The fear in his engineer's voice was palpable. These were beings who had conquered star systems, who had seen the destruction of entire civilizations. Now they sounded like frightened children. But wait, wasn't this supposed to be a primitive species? Weren't humans supposed to be barely capable of interplanetary travel? The cognitive dissonance was staggering. The view screen flickered back to Admiral Morrison, but something had changed. The defeated expression was gone, replaced by something that made Vex's blood run cold. Morrison was smiling, a cold, predatory smile that belonged on the face of an apex predator. Not a member of a supposedly primitive species. Did you really? Think, Morrison said slowly, each word dripping with barely contained satisfaction, that we'd just roll over and die. You've made a terrible mistake, Commander. Welcome to the Sol System Defense Grid. The casual confidence in the human's voice was more terrifying than any weapon. This wasn't the tone of a defeated species begging for mercy. This was the voice of a hunter who had just sprung the perfect trap. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice echoed. From Morrison's bridge, crisp and professional, all enemy vessels disabled, sir. They're completely trapped. The gravitational web is holding at 100% efficiency. Gravitational web? X's mind reeled. That was theoretical technology, something that existed only in the most advanced computational models. Even the Dominion's greatest scientists had deemed it impossible to implement on such a massive scale. Vex felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries, genuine terror. The kind of bone-deep fear that came from realizing you weren't the apex predator you thought you were. Impossible. Your species is primitive. You have no technology capable of wrong again, Morrison interrupted, his smile widening. We've been preparing for this day for 60 years. Ever since we first detected your expansion patterns through our deep space monitoring networks, every ship in your fleet is now our prisoner. The truth hit Vex like a physical blow, crushing his reality like a house of cards in a hurricane. Earth hadn't been helpless at all. They'd been waiting, planning, preparing for this exact moment with the patience of a species that understood the long game. The implications were staggering. If humans had been monitoring Dominion expansion patterns for 60 years, if they had developed technology that could immobilize an entire fleet, then what else had they been hiding? What other surprises were waiting in the depths of this seemingly primitive solar system? Around the bridge, Vex's officers stared at their useless control panels with dawning horror. The mighty Galactic Dominion, terror of 1,000 worlds, had been outmaneuvered by a species they'd dismissed as insignificant. It was like discovering that the mouse you'd been hunting had actually been a lion in disguise. The question that burned in everyone's mind was simple. How had humanity managed to hide such advanced technology? More importantly, what were they planning to do with 300 trapped Dominion warships? As emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the bridge, Commander Vex realized that everything he thought he knew about this conquest had been wrong. The hunters had become the hunted, and the game was far from over. Just like how small consistent investments can compound into massive wealth over time. Something we'll explore in our next video about the incredible power of compounding humanities. Decades of patient preparation were about to pay dividends in the most spectacular way imaginable. Don't miss it. Captain Lisa Parker stood in the heart of the secret Luna base facility, her fingers dancing across holographic controls that would have been impossible to imagine just decades ago. The massive underground complex stretched for miles beneath the moon's surface, its corridors humming with the kind of technology that made science fiction look like ancient history. Around her, the most advanced technology in the galaxy hummed with deadly purpose. Each system calibrated to perfection through years of testing and refinement. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, standing in a facility that officially didn't exist, operating equipment that supposedly couldn't be built. All while the galaxy's most feared military force hung helplessly in space above them. Sometimes the best hiding place was right in plain sight. Status report. Admiral Morrison's voice crackled through the comm system, cutting through the ambient hum of machinery that could reshape the very fabric of space-time. All grid stations. Are fully operational, sir, Lisa replied, her excitement barely contained despite years of military training. The adrenaline coursing through her veins was intoxicating. This was the moment they'd all been working toward for decades. The Dominion fleet is completely immobilized. Their ships are caught in a gravitational web they can't break. The readings on her console were almost too good to be true. 300 of the galaxy's most advanced warships, each one capable of destroying entire planets, now floated like toys in a cosmic spiderweb. The gravitational field generators hidden throughout the solar system had performed flawlessly, creating an invisible prison that even the Dominion's most advanced engines couldn't overcome. But wait, you might be wondering how humanity managed to build such incredible technology in secret. The answer is going to blow your mind. On Earth's surface, Colonel Tom Anderson watched from the hidden command bunker beneath. The Rocky Mountains' massive energy cannons rose from concealed positions. Across the planet, the fear he'd carried for years, the constant worry that humanity would be caught unprepared, was finally transforming into fierce satisfaction.
Ow.
These weren't the primitive missile systems the Dominion had detected. These were weapons that could crack moons in half. Admiral Tom reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. All planetary defense systems are online. We have target locks on every enemy vessel. The Denver array is showing full power. The Yellowstone installation is at maximum capacity, and the Pacific grid is ready for continuous fire. The transformation was breathtaking. Within minutes, Earth had gone from appearing defenseless to bristling with enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. Hidden installations across every continent revealed themselves, their camouflage systems powering down to reveal the true scope of humanity's preparations. Morrison's face appeared, on screens throughout the solar system, addressing not just his own forces, but broadcasting directly to the trapped Dominion fleet. His voice burned with righteous anger, the kind of fury that came from watching bullies terrorize the innocent for far too long. Commander Vex, you want to know how we did this? Simple. We learned from every species you've enslaved. The silence that followed was deafening. On the bridge of every Dominion vessel, officers stared at their screens in growing horror as the implications sank in. If humanity had been in contact with enslaved species, if they'd been gathering intelligence and technology for decades, then everything they thought they knew about galactic politics was wrong. The Altarians taught us energy manipulation, Morrison continued, his words hitting like hammer blows. The Centauri showed us gravity control. The Rigelians shared their shield technology. The Vorthang gave us their quantum computational matrices. Each name he mentioned was another nail in the Dominion's coffin. These weren't just random alien species, they were some of the most advanced civilizations the Dominion had ever conquered. Civilizations that had supposedly been completely subjugated and broken. Dr. Rebecca Hayes, Earth's chief scientist, stepped into view beside Morrison. Her eyes blazed with the fury of someone who'd dedicated her life to this moment, who'd sacrificed everything to ensure humanity's survival. The years of sleepless nights, the constant fear of discovery, the weight of carrying secrets that could save or damn their entire species, it had all led to this. While you were busy terrorizing the galaxy, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd unlocked the universe's deepest secrets. We were building the largest resistance network in galactic history. Every primitive species you dismissed has been working with us. Every conquered world has been feeding us intelligence about your weaknesses. The scope of the deception was staggering. For over 60 years, humanity had been playing the long game, building alliances with species the Dominion thought were completely under their control. It was like discovering that every person you'd ever defeated had been secretly working together to plan your downfall. But here's the kicker. And this is where it gets really interesting. The Dominion's own arrogance had been their undoing. They'd been so convinced of their superiority that they'd never considered the possibility that their primitive subjects might be capable of strategic thinking. The Zephyrians helped us perfect our stealth technology, Dr. Hayes continued, her words flowing like a river of revealed secrets. The crystalline entities shared their energy storage techniques. The void swimmers taught us how to manipulate space-time itself. Even the machine intelligences you thought you'd destroyed, they survived, and they remembered. On the Dominion. Flagship Vex's world crumbled as he realized the scope of humanity's deception. These weren't primitive savages stumbling around in the dark. They were the architects of the Dominion's destruction. Master strategists who'd turned the galaxy's greatest weaknesses oppressed populations into their greatest strength. The revelation was like watching dominoes fall in reverse. A piece of information rebuilding a picture that the Dominion had thought they'd completely erased. Every species they'd conquered, every world they'd enslaved, every civilization they'd dismissed as irrelevant, they'd all been working together, sharing knowledge, planning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. See, Commander? Morrison's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. You made one fatal mistake. You assumed that fear would keep your subjects loyal. But fear can also unite people in ways you never imagined. The question burning in everyone's mind was simple. If humanity had been secretly coordinating with enslaved species across the galaxy, what else had they been planning? More importantly, was this trap just the beginning of something much bigger? As the full scope of the resistance network became clear, one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. The age of the Dominion was ending, and a new chapter in galactic history was about to begin. Just like how small, consistent actions can compound into massive, world-changing results over time, something we'll explore in our next video about. The incredible power of compounding humanity's decades of patient alliance building were about to reshape the entire galaxy. Don't miss it. Commander Vex watched in horror as the holographic display showed the true scope of humanity's rebellion. The massive tactical screen that had once displayed the Dominion's unstoppable advance now painted a picture of absolute chaos. Red warning. Lights indicated Dominion worlds across the galaxy, and every single one was under attack simultaneously. It was like watching a carefully constructed empire crumble in real time. Each blinking red dot representing decades of conquest being undone in a matter of hours. His forearms trembled as he processed what he was seeing. This wasn't just a localized uprising or a few scattered resistance cells causing trouble. This was a coordinated galactic revolution that had been planned with military precision and executed with devastating efficiency. The scope of it was beyond anything he'd ever imagined possible. "Sir?" His communications officer screamed, his voice cracking with panic as reports flooded in from across the galaxy, receiving distress calls from the homeworlds. Massive coordinated attacks. On all fronts. The Rigel system is under siege. Centauri colonies are in revolt. Even the core worlds are reporting massive internal uprisings. The sheer volume of incoming distress signals was overwhelming the communication systems. Every channel was filled with desperate calls for help, reports of strategic installations being destroyed, the terrified voices of Dominion commanders who'd never faced real resistance before. It was like listening to the death throes of an empire that had seemed invincible just hours ago. But wait, how had nobody seen this coming? How had the galaxy's most sophisticated intelligence network missed a rebellion of this magnitude? The answer was as brilliant as it was terrifying. The main screen split into dozens of feeds, showing the impossible enslaved species. Rising up with advanced weapons that rivaled the Dominion's own technology, massive Dominion bases exploding. In carefully orchestrated chain reactions, and human ships that shouldn't exist according to every intelligence report, leading the charge with tactical precision that spoke of decades of preparation. On the Altarian homeworld, Crystalline, beings who'd been forced into mining operations were now wielding energy weapons that could slice through Dominion armor like paper. The Centauri, supposedly broken after centuries of oppression, had somehow managed to build a fleet that was decimating orbital defense platforms with surgical strikes. Even the machine intelligences that the Dominion thought they'd completely destroyed were back, their digital consciousness piloting swarms of automated fighters that moved with inhuman coordination. Admiral Morrison's voice cut through the chaos like a blade, calm and authoritative, despite the magnitude of the moment. Every species you've conquered remembers their freedom, Vex. Every world you've enslaved has been secretly preparing for this day. And now, his smile was terrifying in its absolute confidence. Now, they're all coming for you. The psychological impact was devastating. For centuries, the Dominion had ruled through fear and intimidation, convinced that their subjects were too broken and scattered to pose any real threat. But now they were discovering that oppression doesn't destroy the desire for freedom, it just forces it underground. Where it can grow stronger and more determined, Colonel Anderson's excited voice echoed across the command channels, barely able to contain his elation. "Admiral, we're receiving confirmation from all sectors. The Dominion military is in full retreat. Their empire is collapsing faster than our most optimistic projections." The reports were coming in so fast that it was hard to process them all. The Vorthin Nebula installations had been completely destroyed. The slave markets on Kepler Prime were burning. The Dominion's most secure research facilities had been infiltrated and their data cores wiped clean. It was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion, each falling piece bringing down others in an unstoppable cascade. "Captain." Parker's hands flew over her controls as she coordinated the massive operation, her years of training finally paying dividends in the most spectacular way imaginable. "Sir, the gravitational web is holding perfectly. The enemy fleet is completely helpless. We're also receiving reports that similar traps have been activated at key strategic points throughout the galaxy." The coordination was flawless. While the Dominion fleet remained trapped in Earth's solar system, similar operations were being executed across dozens of star systems simultaneously. It was like watching a master chess player reveal that every move for the past 60 years had been building toward this single, devastating checkmate. But here's what makes this even more incredible, and pay attention because this is where it is. Gets really good, the entire operation was being run on a principle that the Dominion had never understood. Voluntary cooperation instead of forced compliance. Morrison leaned forward, his eyes burning with determination and righteous fury. "Commander Vex, your reign of terror ends here. Galactic Dominion is finished. Your ships will remain trapped in our system until every conquered world is free." The finality in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a negotiation or a temporary setback. This was the end of an era, the collapse of a galactic empire that had seemed unstoppable just hours before. The irony was almost poetic. The Dominion's own success had sown the seeds of its destruction by creating a galaxy full of species with nothing left to lose. Through the viewport, Vex could see his mighty fleet hanging motionless in space, their weapons useless, their crews trapped like insects in amber. The most powerful military force in the galaxy had been defeated not through superior firepower, but through superior strategy and the power of united resistance. 300 ships that had terrorized countless worlds were now nothing more than floating monuments to the Dominion's arrogance. The psychological warfare was just as devastating as the physical attacks. Every Dominion commander across the galaxy was now questioning everything they'd been told about their subjects' capabilities. If humans could hide this level of technology and coordination, what else had they missed? What other primitive species were actually master strategists in disguise? The urgency in Morrison's voice was unmistakable. "This is just the beginning. Earth's doors are now permanently closed to tyrants like you, but they're wide open too. Any species seeking freedom." As the reports continued to pour in, one thing became crystal clear. The galaxy was being reborn. The age of oppression was ending, and a new era of cooperation and mutual respect was beginning. The question that remained was simple. What would this new galaxy look like, and what role would humanity play in shaping its future? The revolution was far from over, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Galactic Dominion was finished, and the free peoples of the galaxy were just getting started, just like how small, consistent actions can compound into massive leaps, world-changing results over time, something we'll explore in our next video. About the incredible power of compounding, this galactic revolution started with tiny acts of resistance that grew into an unstoppable force. Don't miss it. 6 months later, the galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. The Dominion's vast empire lay in ruins. its survivors scattered to the outer rim territories like leaves blown by a cosmic wind. Former slave worlds rebuilt their civilizations, while humans helped coordinate the greatest liberation in galactic history. It was like watching an entire galaxy emerge from a dark age and step into the light of freedom for the first time in centuries. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Worlds that had been strip-mined and devastated were now blooming with new life as their native species reclaimed their heritage. Altarians had begun rebuilding their crystal cities, their structures now gleaming with a brilliance that spoke of hope rather than despair. The Centauri had restored their orbital gardens, creating floating paradises that served as symbols of their renewed spirit. Even the machine intelligences had found new purpose, using their vast computational power to help coordinate reconstruction efforts across dozens of star systems. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the newly constructed Earth Defense Headquarters, watching news feeds from across the galaxy. The building itself was a testament to humanity's new role in galactic affairs, a blend of Earth architecture and alien technology that symbolized the cooperation between species that had once seemed impossible. His heart swelled with pride as he saw former Dominion worlds celebrating their freedom with festivals that lasted for days, their joy infectious even across the vast distances of space. But success, as any leader knows, brings its own challenges. The question that kept Morrison awake at night wasn't whether they'd won. It was whether they could maintain what they'd built. Admiral Captain Lisa Parker approached with a data pad, her face glowing with satisfaction. The woman who'd once operated the gravitational web controls now served as Earth's liaison to the newly formed galactic government. The Free Worlds Alliance has officially ratified the Galactic Freedom Charter. 47 species have signed on as founding members, with 12 more expected to join within the next month. The numbers were staggering. In just 6 months, they'd gone from a single resistance network to a legitimate galactic government. That represented billions of sentient beings across hundreds of star systems. The charter itself was a masterpiece of diplomatic cooperation, establishing fundamental rights for all species. While respecting the unique cultures and needs of each member world, Colonel Tom Anderson joined them, his weathered face creased with a rare smile. The man who'd spent years living in fear of alien invasion now served as Earth's military advisor to the Alliance. The last Dominion holdouts surrendered this morning. "It's over, Jake. We actually did it." The relief in Tom's voice was palpable. For decades, they'd all carried the weight of knowing that humanity's survival hung by a thread. Now, not only had they survived, but they'd fundamentally changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The species that had once been considered primitive and insignificant were now the architects of a new galactic order. Dr. Rebecca Hayes burst through the doors, her excitement infectious. The woman who dedicated her life to unlocking the secrets of alien technology now led the Alliance's scientific council. "Admiral, the Regellians just transmitted the coordinates to 3 more enslaved systems. We can free them within the month." Work was far from over. Despite the Dominion's collapse, pockets of their influence remained scattered throughout the galaxy. Isolated worlds still groaned under the weight of oppression, their populations unaware that liberation was possible. Each rescue operation was a carefully planned mission that required the coordination of multiple species working together with clockwork precision. Morrison nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and hope in equal measure. The fear that had driven them for so long had transformed into something greater, a determination to ensure no species would ever again face the terror of domination. It was like watching a guardian instinct expand from protecting a single world to protecting an entire galaxy. But here's what makes this story truly remarkable, and this is the part that gives me chills every time I think about it. The victory hadn't come from superior technology or overwhelming force. It had come from the simple power of beings working together toward a common goal. On the main screen, former Commander Vex appeared in shackles, being led to a tribunal on the liberated world of Altara. His once mighty presence was broken, his yellow eyes dim with defeat. The creature who'd once terrorized star systems now shuffled like a broken old man, his multiple arms hanging limp at his sides. The trial itself was being broadcast across the galaxy, not as a spectacle of revenge, but as a symbol of justice finally being served. "The irony," Morrison said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom, "is that they taught us the most important lesson of all. When you push people hard enough, when you threaten everything they hold dear, they don't just fight back, they become unstoppable." The lesson was profound in its simplicity. The Dominion had believed that fear and oppression would keep their subjects weak and divided. Instead, they'd created the very conditions that made unified resistance inevitable. By threatening everyone, they'd given everyone a reason to work together. Through the massive windows of the command center, Earth's blue skies seemed brighter than ever. Humanity had not just survived their first contact with galactic civilization, they had fundamentally changed it. The planet that had once seemed so isolated and vulnerable was now the beating heart of a galactic alliance. Dedicated to freedom and cooperation, the transformation was visible everywhere. Ships from dozens of species now docked at Earth's orbital stations, their crews working alongside humans in an atmosphere of mutual respect. The Moon, once home to humanity's most secret military installation, now hosted the Alliance's diplomatic headquarters, where representatives from across the galaxy gathered to shape their common future. The galaxy now belonged to all free species, protected by the network of worlds that had united under Earth's leadership. And in the depths of space, the gravitational web still held the remnants of the Dominion fleet, a permanent reminder that some doors, once closed, would never open again. As Morrison watched the news feeds showing celebrations across dozens of worlds, he realized that this was just the beginning. The real work of building a free and prosperous galaxy was only starting, and it would require the same patience, determination, and cooperation that had made their victory possible. Age of tyranny was over. The age of freedom had begun. Just like how small, consistent actions can compound into massive, world-changing results over time. Something we'll explore in our next video about the incredible power of compounding this galactic transformation. Started with tiny acts of resistance that grew into an unstoppable force for good. Don't miss it. The end.